thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to speak here. I'm just going to provide you guys with a quick introduction to the idea of self-sovereign identity and overall the ideas of digital identity and how it's kind of solved right now as a problem and how we want to have it solved in the future. And then I'm going to show you the vision of Jolocom and how we try to, based on our current alpha version and also on our future kind of plans, set the new default standard for how we solve digital identities for all different players, like identity of things, identity of humans, and identity of organizations. So kind of keeping the example of humans in this talk for most of the time. Can you hear me well?
It's not working, actually.
It's not?
It
OK.
Is. It's just too quiet. Oh.
All right. So I just continue. So talking about Jolocom and digital identity starts usually with this. It's a story of many people and their identities. And talking about digital identity means that we don't have just one identity. We don't have, oh, now I'm hearing myself very well as well. So it basically is the representation of you in the digital space. That's what digital identity is. And the problem we have today is that we have not one representation of ourselves, but several, actually hundreds. So these numbers under the people's faces are numbers of accounts, numbers of digital profiles, and by that, numbers of representations of these people. And that's not a bad thing. So it's totally fine to have personas, and we should actually continue with having these multiple identities. But the question is, can we manage and control them from our one unique identity that we are as a human being, right, as a person? Should we not be able to have one identity from which all the kind of sub-personas of ourselves are actually organized and kind of managed? And the problem with this is that we currently live in a situation where identity is managed not by us, but by other parties. We're basically provided with an identity by a third party. So there are identity providers all over the web. It used to be that every single service you used was an identity provider, right? So whatever blog you logged into, whatever site you logged into, it always was a new identity created for you. And a few years back, we saw a new movement towards kind of identity providers that are useful all over the place. They're now called social logins. And what they basically do is to provide you with access to services that they're usually not related to, not necessarily. But these services use the identity provided by some other kind of company. And this is just how it kind of works in the current space, but it doesn't solve the problem of you having multiple identities. It might make it a bit easier for you to manage it in the sense of just having to remember one password, having to remember one username, so for example, your Facebook or Google usernames. But it doesn't actually change the situation of where your data is, who owns the data, or like who can get all the access rights to it and can kind of administer how you can exchange data with each other. And it still creates the problem of trust, because you always have to trust Facebook, just remembering last week's new kind of information about Facebook, and also trusting all these other parties. So you have to trust them that they keep your data safe for you, and that they are interacting with these parties, like again linking to Facebook in an awesome way that protects your data and just gives these services the access to your data that they actually need to fulfill their service. Right now, this is actually not the case. So you as a user cannot trust your service to protect your personal data. And even if you could, you would still have to manage several identities. And that's why we as Jolocom are working on a solution that kind of goes one level further, of changing the whole paradigm of organizing digital identities. Because going away from the identity provider, where the car sharing company has to ask Facebook if I exist, and then Facebook answers, yes, he exists, and I'm let into the car sharing service. In the new world, the car sharing service is going to ask you directly. And the car sharing service, for the first time ever, is going to be able to trust you. Because the problem with this picture I showed you is that right now there's no way a service like an online store, food delivery service, can actually trust you directly when you claim, hey, it's me, I'm this person, and I have a driver's license, so give me the car. If you do that in the current web with the current infrastructure we have, you are not going to get it, because they're unable to trust you, and they need to rely on these third parties that they have some kind of trust relationship with. And in the way we solve this is with self-sovereign digital identity. I can just collect questions in the end, if that's fine. All right. So self-sovereign identity basically means that you own and control your personal data and all the attributes that are connected to your identity. Attributes are everything that makes you a unique person and that describes this unique person, right? So it's your name, your age, where you live, the statement that you're above 18 or the statement that you're above 21, the fact that you have a driver's license, all these kind of things are attributes. They make up your identity. And the thing we change in comparison to what the current identity providers do is that you become the identity provider yourself. There is no Jolocom identity provider in this game. It's basically you owning a tool that allows you to store, manage, and control your attributes and where these attributes are used, who gets access to it, and so on. So just talking about the example of age, having all the attributes stored on my phone as private claims, I can decide which kind of attribute I want to share in a specific interaction. So looking at the case of a bar in the US, when I want to get into the bar, I have to prove that I'm 21, above 21, actually. And right now what I do is that I give them my driver's license. And they usually scan the whole thing. So they get all the information that is visible on the driver's license, my full birth date, and so on. In this case, you can actually exchange a verifiable claim or verified claim of you being above 21. So they will never find out what your actual birth date is. They will never find out that you're 30 or 66. They just get the fact that you're legally allowed to get into the bar. And this kind of verifiable claim is super powerful because it also allows you to say that you're born in a specific year if the site needs to know that you're born in a specific year. Or it allows you to send your whole birth date. So you can kind of exchange the information on a level of detail that is necessary for your specific interaction, but not beyond. And the cool thing about it is that only that information is actually stored on the database of the service. And you can decide, like saying that here in the food delivery case, you just have to give your address and your payment details. You can decide that this information is only stored for one exchange. Because by sending this verifiable claim, you also send the request to use it in a certain way. And you let the service sign this request. That's the way that we try to kind of enforce things like GDPR, the new data protection regulation in the European Union. And coming back from this is the kind of dev talk that I want to give a quick teaser in. So we solve this by giving you a unique kind of master key that you create on your device in your Jolocom app. It's a fully decentralized app, so we're not connected to it in any way. Like Jolocom never sees which kind of master key you create for yourself. You can either create it with a token that creates entropy for you on a very high level, or you can create the entropy yourself. What you get is basically one key that serves as your main root identity. And from that key, you derive several sub-keys that work as your sub-identities for your specific personas that you want to interact in. And these persona keys, they're basically DIDs. That's a new standard that emerged from the Decentralized Identity Foundation. And these DIDs are stored together with an IPFS hash in the Ethereum blockchain as transactions, basically. And from there, looking up, like after exchanging the DIDs with a service that you want to log into, so this is the flow for a single sign-on solution, okay? Exchanging these keys with the service allows both parties to check in the blockchain if this transaction exists, if the data is correct, and then you basically look in the IPFS network for the DDO, which contains your public claims. And public claims are really just, as a minimum information, your public key connected to this DID, so to your like sub-identity private public key, and a bunch of statements about you that are supposed to be open. So you, for example, could have a public statement that you're human and that this kind of statement of you're human and you're not a bot is also already verified, right? So you don't have to necessarily always tell everyone that you're also human. There's some basic information about you that can be public, so to say. And then this DDO basically allows the two of you to exchange data, being sure that you exchange your data with the right person or with the right service. And then the kind of specific interaction that is not public and that you can only do after kind of having this mutual verification process happening is that the service sends a signed request for some information. For example, your address and you being above 21. And then you just send via HTTPS encrypted transfer your signed verifiable claims. And verifiable claims are also a standard by the W3C consortium. So in the long run, we imagine that both the DIDs, so your personal sub-identities and personas, and also the signed verifiable claims, like for the case that some other service also uses the Jolocom library, can be kind of resolved everywhere. So it doesn't matter if you use, for example, Uport or Sovereign in the long run. The idea is that you can always log into some service if they agree on the DID and the verifiable claims standard. And if you already want to test Jolocom, we have an alpha version right now for Android. So yeah, just get on it and get a t-shirt from our office that is just 5 minutes away. Thank you. Okay. So there was one question before. Who was the person that asked during the talk?
You can ask.
Okay.
Is this based on the ERC 725 or what is it?
No, this is not based on ERC 725. The kind of idea by Fabian, you mean? The one from Fabian, and I'm not a dev, so unfortunately I can't answer you all the kind of high-tech dev question, like high-def questions, but the ERC 725 was specifically developed for the context of Ethereum, and this works outside of Ethereum and inside, like towards Ethereum, so to say. So you can sign into dApps. With the current release, you can't already interact with smart contracts because in a previous version, we had the smart contract, like the Ethereum wallet address as a part of the identity. Now we have to enable this again. Like in the current release, it's not there. But you can already sign into all the kind of Web 2.0 applications if you want to, and services, and also into some of the decentralized apps with this kind of setup. You just have to implement the Jolocom library and get an own Jolocom kind of based identity for yourself or for your service.
I don't know much about self-sovereignty. What's the word again?
Self-sovereign identity.
Sovereign identity, my God. Okay, so I don't know much about it, but so is this, how far is that proprietary? And how far is that actually compatible with other solutions that are currently being developed? Because obviously, one of the reasons why we have the identity providers such as Facebook is because virtually everyone uses them. So this is why they became an authority. Now, if you are a proprietary service, then everyone has to flock to your solution, and if some other incompatible solution is there, so that's the obvious chicken egg problem. So how is that in your case?
So there's two questions hidden in your question, right? And that's really awesome that you put it out because I just forgot about it in the talk. So going for the one thing, like talking about open standards and being proprietary. So like the current identity solution provided by Facebook login or Google login, that's proprietary, right? Because you're going into the walled garden. What we use is based on the W3C consortium and the Decentralized Identity Foundation. They have basically two main things they work on. So they work on decentralized identifiers, which are the DIDs I just talked about. That's a way of kind of defining what a unique identifier is, how it can be used, and how the whole kind of process of resolving it should be.
And are they also that
registry
that you had on top?
No.
Are they providing that registry?
No, the point is like
Could you go back to that slide?
the whole thing about decentralized identity is that the registry is distributed and trustable. Here. So in our case, the registry for the DIDs is the Ethereum blockchain because it's a public, permissionless ledger that we think is the best standard for kind of setting up a registry. Like other identity solutions have a public permissioned ledger, for example, Sovereign. So they have different kind of benefits for scalability, but at the same time you have to trust their governance network. And we, for us, as in Jolocom, decided that we want to have a public permissionless ledger as the highest standard for having a public registry. Easy as that. And then everything we do, so the library of Jolocom that you can implement on the side of the service, the app, and also how we kind of manage the whole backend is public and open source. So while we develop, you can always go into our GitHub and already check what we do on a day-to-day basis. It's not that we gonna wait with getting public until we have a beta version or something like this. That is also very common right now. But we actually have a constantly open development process. And we're happy if anyone wants to drop in and discuss stuff that we do.
So, but that in fact does mean that you are using standards that are out there,
yeah.
but you are proprietary implementation of those standards?
No.
Someone has
proprietary.
To use SDK, no?
Sorry?
So someone has to use your SDK? Or is it an SDK
Yeah.
that is provided by the foundation and the customer alone decides that he wants to go with Jolocom and not with anyone else,
Yeah.
but the service that uses, that wants you as a customer can use
Yeah.
a foundation provided open source
Yeah.
library or SDK that talks to whoever
Yeah.
provider the customer is
The
with.
point is, in the process of developing a standard while you actually fly, right, is just pretty tricky. So this is an open SDK. Like nothing Jolocom does is in any way closed source. You don't have to worry about licenses. They're all like, I think the library is MIT licensed, so you can even like build for-profit stuff on it, which should be possible as well. But everything we do so far and everything we want to do on this layer of like just providing the identities to work is going to remain open source. The point is, what you're making is that, okay, everybody has to use this library, right? Everybody has to kind of implement our SDK right now.
Or and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So you have 10 providers, and they have to use 10 different SDKs because all customers will be distributed.
Exactly, and then it's not self-sovereign identity, and it's not decentralized, like one unique identity for you that you can use everywhere that you manage. But the point is, right now, like talking about like companies that do it at least to a high standard, like talking about, for example, Uport and Sovereign as like competitors, if you want. What they enable is also the DID spec as we use it. And like Uport currently goes into like having their next releases following our architecture in some ways, going away from this kind of too smart contract version that they have right now. And they also use verifiable claims for stuff that happens outside of Ethereum. At least that's the idea. So and the same is true for Sovereign. So it's going to come together at some point, and that's what the Decentralized Identity Foundation is for. Okay, so that's just, right now it's pretty tricky to kind of convince them of like, hey guys, we already use this one SDK, because then, I mean, it's a really fresh kind of product, and everybody's trying to figure it out. So the first thing we had to fix was the DIDs, like just what is a DID? What is a decentralized identifier? What makes sense? And then the current project in the diff, like the foundation, is getting clear on, okay, how do you resolve them? So how can you universally make them resolvable in different kind of backends? And then the second part is this W3C consortium part of verifiable claims. How are they kind of specified, and also how do you verify them? So that whatever verifier it might be, like a verifier that initially started with Uport, can also start verifying Jolocom attributes. And that's the kind of future vision that we work towards, and that's why this layer of identity provision should be completely free of a token. Because if you introduce a token there, you kind of lock the whole thing in again, and you don't provide proper incentives for people to kind of like leave their project behind and come to you. Like it's a bit like differentiating between SMTP and a nice email client. Like everybody kind of uses SMTP, but then you build an awesome email client on top. And that's the kind of competition that I would like to see here. Because that allows for really nice cooperation on the level of, okay, like where do we want to kind of work together and have like also like a chance to win against these 15 million websites that use Facebook login right now, and the 10,000 that every day add up to that list. Because you have to provide something that is so accessible and open for everyone to kind of take on, and also provide for different languages and cultural kind of regions, that it can be used by everyone and applied by everyone. And then on top of that layer, you build some applications and you build your business models. But if you want to win against centralized identity provision that we have right now, you have to have this base layer totally open.
So you could also then probably have some open auth provider as an intermediary for now until everyone uses that thing in its origin. So like directly. So you could essentially become one of the providers, and you and your competitors could be providers for any open auth solution that I then use as a service provider, just to say, give me an identity, I don't care where it comes from, and that provider uses more and more self-sovereign identity services until one day we move to using the IDs directly. Does that make sense?
That could be an interesting thing to look into. Like at Jolocom at least, like what our kind of aim is to provide something that is from the start fully decentralized. And with OpenAuth, if I'm not wrong, you can't actually do that. So that's the limitation that we gave to ourselves, because we say we want to be trustable as a company from the start, being fully open source and fully decentralized. So we don't introduce some part of we don't introduce any link in the whole kind of chain here that can be centralized and is only controlled by one entity. And I think in OpenAuth you can't actually do that. That's why we go towards the IDs. There's this very nice workshop, I think this week actually, or next week in California, the identity workshop, Internet Identity Workshop. I don't know if you heard about it. Like they started with the OpenAuth kind of idea a few years back, and they kind of all shift towards talking about DIDs and decentralized self-sovereign identity now, because they see this as the next kind of evolutionary step in it. So I hope we're going to develop towards this. Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm running out of time, but we can speak in a one-on-one.